Dr. Fanike, thank you so much for joining the We Rise podcast. For folks who might not have had a chance to hear my conversation with Dr. Fanike, it released a couple months ago, episode 26, and you are in for such a treat. Dr. Fanike is a powerhouse leader, but also is not afraid of looking at the hard things in life to really see how we can transform and do the work with heart. So I'm really excited that Dr. Fanike, you're back. Will you introduce yourself so folks know who I have the delight of speaking to today, please?
Of course. Thank you so much, Christine, for having me. As you said, I am Dr. Fanike. I'm the Master Healing Alchemist. I am a corporate wellness quality improvement expert and a corporate trainer, but also a licensed trauma therapist and someone that focuses on healing the whole person. Just realizing that, all of us affect all of us. and,
Amen to
it's,
that.
and
Right.
and it's all tied together, so I definitely move from that approach and just working with individuals and in the corporate setting. Yeah, just the goal of just helping people to heal holistically.
Yeah, awesome. And it is that, I think so often we try to separate our personal from our professional. That's certainly
Mhm.
the way that business culture in many parts of this globe rolls, and it's connected, and it's if we don't recognize that connection, then we can't really grow in the ways that we want to from that connected place. So you did such a beautiful weaving of your story in the last episode, so I want to invite folks to listen to that episode for your full story, but can you give us some of the highlights of what brought you to this work, a little bit about your story?
Yeah, so I grew up in Brooklyn, New York in the 80s. I was born in Brooklyn, New York in the 80s. And, if anyone's not familiar at that time, there was so much going on in the
Mm-hmm.
80s
Mm-hmm.
in New York, just in general. But specifically where I lived, it was a high crime area. There was that was the crack cocaine era, a lot of, crime, drugs, a lot of, sex and rock and roll and
Mm.
uh, all of the
Yeah.
all of the things. And so just being exposed to that at an early age. I grew up in a household where, my mom and my dad, they were never married, but my mom, they did, of course, have a relationship. My dad was very abusive towards my mom. And just, being in that environment, we were prone to seeing violence. And so
Mm-hmm.
saw my first murder at 4. And also, just waking up every day and seeing people lined up outside the hospital, the
Mm-hmm.
methadone clinic, because that's what was happening back then.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad, he unexpectedly passed away when I was 6, after physically assaulting my mom and threatening to come back to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of that, carried it for a long time because I was young and I grew up in just a typical household of, we don't do therapy. We don't talk about the issues. We don't, you're fine. You look fine. You're eating, you're walking,
Right.
you're
Right.
fine.
You're upright.
um, you're okay.
Yeah.
But realized in adulthood that, hey, I was carrying all this stuff, just coupled with other things, that had happened between that time and adulthood, other traumas, other, heartbreaks, other things that had shifted my perspective around the world and people. And it didn't all come to a head until I was really in like my 30s. And
Mm-hmm.
so, then I had to figure out how to fix it. And in doing so, what I found was that, one, I had to be an active worker in healing my trauma,
Mm-hmm.
but also that I had to make sure that I was tending to my physical, my emotional, my mental, my spiritual, my financial. I had to tend to all of the parts of me and my energetic, parts of me for me to actually heal and to be able to move past it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you had this recognition of healing and ways that you've moved past that. But it's ongoing work too, as you talked about a little bit in that last episode. What have been some of the ways that that healing has taken place for you?
Yeah. So what's crazy is yesterday I went to get a colonic and I hadn't had one in like a while. And
Mm-hmm.
so I go to get my colonic and I always have like these great moments of release in so many
Mm-hmm.
different ways
Mm-hmm.
when I am, getting my colonic. And so I'm laying on the table and, something comes up for me and I'm like, ah, okay, didn't even, think about that. So we went to go see my mom for Mother's Day weekend. And for everyone that's, not familiar, my mom, she, because of her own childhood, she was just very, verbally abusive and emotionally void at times
Mhm.
towards us growing up. And so she's still pretty similar now. So we went to
Mm.
see her over Mother's Day weekend. And I had like planned, like pretty much I had planned this day and I was like, yeah, we're gonna go there. But I'm also a mom. But I was like, hey, I'm gonna, and I'll get back to why I said that in a minute. So I was like, yeah, we're gonna go there. And I figured out, hey, let's go to the aquarium. And to get to the aquarium, we had to like ride a ferry and take a boat and get to the aquarium and then come back. And then we had dinner. And I had tried to organize my siblings to come and everything. So in essence, the Mother's Day really was not about me celebrating, me being a mom.
Mm.
It was, more focused on her being a mom. And she was just very, like, it was okay. I didn't really, whenever it was like, hey, did you enjoy yourself? It's all right,
Mhm.
and it made me one in that moment, I just recognized like I will not be doing this again. Um, because I actually enjoy my Mother's
Yeah.
Days because my
Yeah.
husband, he like does a great job with like planning stuff and he takes me like different places and we always have a good time when we have celebrated, my son is 3, so we've celebrated 2 Mother's Days. Um, but I was like, okay, won't be doing this again. But so I'm laying on the colonic table. I'm in it. I'm in the process. And I realized that I have acquired this thinking, this limited thinking that I
Mm.
am not enough.
Right.
And in my like, so I'm sitting there, I'm laying on a table, and if no one, if you have never had a colonic, it's I have the lights dimmed, laying on the table, I'm in the room by myself, and I'm like, I am not enough.
Mm.
And then in my head, I'm like, but I am enough. So I'm like, where is this coming from? And I'm just, kind of processing. And I realized that being there over the weekend, I was triggered. And, which I am often quite triggered by my mom.
Mm. Mhm.
So, so I was triggered. And when she did that, when she pretty much snubbed, my
Mhm.
efforts,
Mhm.
it made me feel like I am not enough. But that
Mm.
has been a general, I think, theme um throughout my childhood. You are not enough. And so I was a straight A student. I was honor roll. I went to gifted schools. I tested into gifted high school, got in. I was just very, I finished all of my coursework at 16. So I was great in
Mhm.
school. And I remember like bringing home, I think like a 97 or a 98. And my mom was like, well, where's the 100? And I was like, so I always, I think had this idea of I am not enough. And so I'm laying on the table yesterday and I just realized like it's not you or it's not me, right? That's her stuff.
Mhm.
That's her inability to, accept love. That's her inability to recognize that, when people care about you, you treat them a certain way. And, that's her stuff. That's not even, my stuff. And so also though, in that recognition is, hey girl, you've been like shrinking yourself and you've
Mm.
been, playing, small. You haven't really been living up to your full potential because in your head, why would someone want to do this or get this thing from you? Or, who are you to want to, get a corporate contract and, train for a train at a Fortune 500 company? Who are you? And so I just had that realization that, that's something that's still there. Saying all that to say that when you say, yeah, it's not a one and done and it still requires work. Yeah, like I still have stuff come up for
Mhm.
me. And
Mhm.
this has been, constant healing work. I'm having, things come up, they come up. And when they do, but I'm able to better recognize when they come up. I'm also better able to process through them and also implement, the coping skills. And so I'm not
Mm-hmm.
upset, I'm not angry, I'm not, like lashing out, I'm not feeling down on myself or anything of the sort.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, that was there. We know that that's not true. And now what are you going to do about it? Right. Let's
Right.
move forward.
Right.
So that's it. And like I said, I've made a decision that I won't be sacrificing my Mother's Day anymore
Right.
for
you
anyone
have
else.
you have reprioritized your own celebration over.
I'm like, I want a do-over, right? So I'm like, I
Yeah.
might tell my husband, like, we need to have a do-over because
Next Sunday.
I need my Mother's Day and that
Yeah.
sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So so many interesting threads, Dr. Fanike, that you just pulled out. You talked about recognizing when you're triggered, what you do with or from that, recognizing that you have coping skills, and then also making different choices moving forward, boundaries and moving forward. And I think that that's where, at least from my own experience, it's easy to get caught in a loop, to get triggered and get caught in a loop. And I mentioned before we started recording, some wonderings that I've had. I'm curious if you'll talk a little bit about what your own experience is, or working with corporate clients or individual clients, because this is my experience in the business space as well as the personal space. But when our defenses are up, when we get triggered about something, and for me, it tends to be when I get overwhelmed or scared, my defenses come up. And sometimes in the language that I use and I'm playing around with and just being curious with, how are those defenses also equated with the ego? But then what is that protecting? When I let those, and for me, it's a lot about self-nurturing. But when I let those defenses be there, thank you, different parts, but to not drive the bus or run the show, there is that true self. There's that essence there. And there's this tension sometimes of, and I'm using for folks just listening, I'm using an image in my mind of almost a pyramid covering a true gold inside, or something, a shell covering. And for me, it's been a very calloused shell. So what's your experience of how either you work with people, or in your own experience, we let those defenses go, or we nurture and we use, in my experience recently, it's been really letting that pain settle in and deepen and explore and deepen until it transforms into something else. But it's not just, oh, pain, go away, or defenses go away. It's a real active using it as growth, fodder for growth, or compost material, if you will. But to get to that undefended part, it can be really painful. It can be a little like, how do you do that? What does
Mhm.
that look like for you? Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit more
So
about that?
yeah, so definitely. So I think sometimes, right, because it's uncomfortable, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
the feelings come up, they're uncomfortable. And so anything that's uncomfortable, we want to be quick to dismiss it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be like, yeah, just go away. I don't really want to deal with this right now and everything. But I think one of the biggest things that I have had to learn is, you know what, you have to sit in it sometimes. Like you have to, it's sometimes it just has to sit there. And it may sit there for a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. For myself, what I do is I try to communicate to my husband, like, hey, this is what's going on right now, or this is how I'm feeling, or this has come up for me, so that he's aware. So if I'm in a funk for, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 days, he's not like, whoa, what's
What's going on?
happening?
Right.
So I try to be more expressive, like, I'm feeling like this, and this made me feel like this. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking for him to necessarily respond,
Mm-hmm.
but I just want you to be aware of
See.
like how I'm feeling right now, what's going on with me right now, and kind of communicating that. So on a corporate side, it's a little harder sometimes. And the
Yeah.
reason it's a little harder is because, you really have to have that trust in your supervisor. You really have to have that trust and that support in your coworkers. And so one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I think is like extremely important is, of course, I'm a proponent of therapy, but I think one of the big pieces is either having someone in place in that corporate environment that, the employees and leadership can go to, when something comes up, or creating a setup in which there's some type of, wellness activities that's taking place, incorporating it into the day to day, making it normal, like normalizing the fact that, we all have emotions, we all have things that come up, we all have lives outside of work. And then also, utilizing that time off, like taking those breaks, when you do feel like, hey, I'm overwhelmed, or, I need a mental health day. I think personally that I feel like companies would get way more, productivity out of their employees if they said, "Hey, we value you taking care of yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And, if you need a mental health day, take a mental health day. Hey, if I just read this article in Entrepreneur Magazine, and the article was about a CEO who, he uses the 4-day work week system in his company. And so the max amount of hours that employees are allowed to work are 32 hours.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot go over that. And he talked about how he tracks the time. He said that, he doesn't have start times and end times. And so when you get to work, when you start working, you start working. But of course, when they log into the system, the time is tracked. So he's able to, keep that accountability. But what he has found is that, everyone's happier, people are happier to do their jobs. They're way more productive. They're actually getting the stuff done. He said that he's never like had anyone be late on submitting a project, or, like getting anything done. And, I feel like this old model, like times have changed. This old model of, you have to work 40 hours and you're here from 9 to 5. And, while you're here, like you're giving it your all. And, I think, which is evidence in, the great resignation, the higher rates of burnout, just people being able to transition back into that space of, working and being there. It's all, the evidence is there, the numbers are there. We've seen it. It's not the same. We are not the same. And so because we are not the same, we can't keep this model of work comes first and you taking care of yourself comes second.
That's right.
No, like
That's right.
it's not sustainable. That's not sustainable. And so, people have options, and, there's way more access to online work, or remote work. There's way more access to, you know, being a Instagram model.
Mm-hmm.
There's way more access to,
Mm-hmm.
those sources of income, to where people feel like they have choices now, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't have to, be subjected to the whole, that be here at this time and clock out
Mm-hmm.
at this time. And, I
Mm-hmm.
want to see every move that you're making. And no, so there has to be a culture, or an introduction of the culture of care. And people have to be allowed that space to process their feelings and emotions, or it will lead to burnout. And that's on a professional level and a personal level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well said. I love that. So I'm curious, in the article you read in Entrepreneur Magazine, is the are employees being paid for 32 hours a week, or are they being paid for 40 hours a week with the 4-day work week with that model?
It's a salary.
It's a
So
salary. Yeah.
yeah, so
Fascinating.
they are salaried, and it's apparently they are being paid, pretty well,
Mm-hmm.
because he did emphasize again that productivity is really high. Like when
Yeah.
you think about it, you know, I've seen it. People who do have, 40-hour work weeks, how many hours do they really spend working?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
that's just something to keep in mind.
I love that. I just was listening to an episode of Unlocking Us with Brene Brown yesterday, and Brene Brown's taking the summer off and giving 4 weeks off for her team this summer, and I think that less is more. I think less is
Mhm.
more in our personal lives. I know for me, I'm burned out by Fridays. Fridays are like my hiking with a friend morning, and then like care in the afternoon. And
Mhm.
there's just, if I don't recharge, then I don't have the energy to bring in the way I want to show up for
Yep.
my team, for our clients, for the community we want to build. And am also really aware of our team as well. How do we facilitate a space where people can be themselves, take care of themselves, So key. And then how can people also, it's a different shift. Take the initiative to know that it's okay to take care of themselves or to bring things up when they come up. And it's different. You talked a little bit about our last episode and earlier today about self-worth. And I wonder, Dr. Fanike, what your thoughts are about how self-worth relates to business and teams, and that willingness to show up and say, I'm out today. I'm taking a wellness day, or within teams. For teams to really recognize their own individual worth and the worth of each other. I think that there's that personal professional connection. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you see with businesses?
Yeah. So, I mean, the reality of the situation is, people say you can separate the two, but it's so difficult. If
Mm-hmm.
if my toddler is sick and I'm at work, but you're wanting me to complete this project, how much am I really able to focus on the project?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. So, one of the things that I find a lot of times is that if a person does not, view themselves as worthy of, being cared for or caring for themselves, they will just push it,
Mm-hmm.
and what happens is they start to prioritize the job over themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that comes from fear. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of it comes from fear. Like, if I don't, then will I lose my job, or, will there be sanctions, or, will something happen? And so, when working, in a team capacity, I think one of the biggest pieces is to kind of set that schedule up front. Like you said, like Fridays are like are like your days, right? So Wednesdays and Fridays are more of my, not laid back, but unstructured. I'll say that. Those are like my unstructured days
Mm-hmm.
where I have the space to say, yeah, okay, I want to do this or I want to do that. Saturdays, I never like plan work stuff because we're doing stuff with the kids. So typically I'm working. So Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, and then Thursdays.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that works for me because I realize I need that downtime. So what happens is, I think Brene Brown is a genius, for doing that, because what she's saying is, I value my health and wellness and my time off. But guess what? I also value your health and wellness. I also realize that I can't do what I do without you. And
Mm-hmm.
so I need you to take the time to recharge. But I think that the thing with teams is that establishing that route, establishing that schedule. So, these are the days we're going to meet. These are the days that, you have to work on whatever it is that you need to work on, whatever that looks like for you, in whatever hours like for
Mm-hmm.
you.
Yeah.
I've been on teams where, personally, I've been up 2, 3 in the morning and I'm emailing at 2, 3 in the morning. And my husband says I'm insane. He's like, why are you emailing people And I'm like, well, this is when the thoughts are,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
percolate, and now I'm able to process everything while it's quiet, right?
Right.
And so then when people wake up, they see my emails, they're able to respond. We're good. And that has worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
But some people, they get up at 3 in the morning and they're working and they're up, and that's when they're able to do all the things that they need to do. So I think it's respecting who people are. I think it's also being clear that, everyone, the team should never lean on or rely on just one person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there should always be space for that person to say, hey, I need some time off. And people have to respect that.
Mm-hmm.
And being clear that you are not that person and that person is not you, and their needs are not your needs. And so, one of the things that I have loved about COVID is, because so many people were then forced to work from home, we were able to get a better glimpse into people's real lives. Like,
Yes.
you were able to see the kids, because I mean, you couldn't stop them, from coming in.
Right.
I tell people, I used to tell people, like, I have a toddler and
Yes.
he is going to come in here, and
Yep.
he's, big face and big smile, and, hi, he'll come
Right.
on,
Yep.
hi.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a part of my
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? I can't say, hey, mommy's working and you can, he doesn't get that. He's
Right.
no boundaries here.
Right.
So he's like, my mom is in there, I want to go in there to my mom, and so whatever she's doing, whatever. And so, I think, and I've seen that, several people, I've been recording with people and their kids come in and we're doing a podcast, and I'm like, let it roll. I mean, that's
Hmm.
just the reality of the situation. It's
Hmm.
okay. They don't bother me, and let's go. Are you okay with my kid
Reality.
being here? Let's go.
Sure. Totally. So I love
So
that. Yeah.
yeah. So that's it. I was just saying, like, I think that we can forget to humanize each other,
Yes.
and we start to like view ourselves as like these robots and these machines that are just working. And it's like, nope, I have a whole life outside of work,
Hmm. Hmm.
a whole
I love
family.
that. I love that. And that's such a great point. Just when we allow ourselves to see each other as humans, we're all rolling through it, and that the facade that people might put up doesn't actually serve us in the long haul. Like we all
Right.
we all have to go to the bathroom at the end of the day, or multiple times a
Exactly.
day. So might as well just
Exactly.
be honest about that.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
as we get ready pretty soon to wrap up, I'd love to just dive into two things a little bit: alignment and vulnerability. Can you talk a little bit about what, how people can stay in alignment and what that means to you? If that's a word that you use or resonate with, how do we know when we're off at a work meeting? How do we know to pause and come back to center? So I'd love to hear just a little bit about what that looks like for folks in your work.
Yeah. So I am I am big on what feels good to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not what makes sense, not what, adds up, not, 1 + 1 = 2, but what feels good. And so like when I'm working with my clients, on an individual level or in a corporate space, what feels good for you at that time. So you may have a project that you're working on, you may have, 5 things on your to-do list. What is it that you want to work on at that
Love
time?
that.
Why? Because if you force it, it's going to be subpar. You're not going to give it your best anyway. And so I'm very big on what feels good. Like I have these 2 articles that I'm like, I need to write, but I'm just not in a space right now to write
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
So if I force it, one, it's going to take me way longer to write it because I'm forcing it and I'm gonna have to struggle and figure out
Mm-hmm.
what to put on the paper. Or I can just wait for it to just hit me and I'm like, great, I'm ready. Let's go.
Yeah.
So I'm very big on what feels good. And so when we talk about like what's in alignment, I think it's all based on, like intuition. I think it's connected to, again, what feels good, what gets you excited, what makes you feel like, this is it, and so we have these internal, systems that tell us, something is not right, right? We have it for people, we have it for, things that we're doing, we have it when we're in certain environments. It's our little spidey senses, right? So we all have them. Some of us choose to ignore them, some of us
Mm.
choose to not tap into them.
Right.
And then some of us do choose to listen to them, and some of us do choose to rely on them. And so I'm a big person on relying on them. I'm a big person on, if I am somewhere, if I am talking to someone, if I am doing something and it just doesn't feel good, I'm like, yeah, nope, I'm not going, or I don't want to do this, or,
Mm-hmm.
I am that person that, if we're scheduled to go somewhere, I may cancel on you on that day. And it's not anything personal. I'm just like, nope, it's just I'm not feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, people talk about that, like, oh, I'm not feeling that, or oh, I'm not feeling this. Yeah, like listen to that.
Yeah.
Follow
Absolutely.
that. That's okay. It's okay.
Absolutely.
And I think that we have to just become okay with ourselves and other people, not doing things or not forcing things and doing stuff, even when they don't want to do it,
That's
and
right. I
respecting it.
love that. And listening to our bodies as our guides and teachers.
Definitely.
I heard recently, bowing the mind below the heart or at the
Ooh.
level of the heart, and just that's
Mm,
such a beautiful visual for me of humbleness for my mind. I'm
mm,
so grateful for all that it does. Um, but what is, I heard the phrase recently, what is my heart mind? I think from Sarah Blondin, who's a teacher. What does my heart mind say? And
mhm,
that's such a,
mhm,
resonates for me so deeply.
mhm,
Um, so, but yeah, I love that. What do you feel? What do you feel? That's so
mhm.
core and
Yeah, because
something
we
that
don't.
anybody can relate to.
Yeah, but the other thing is that people don't tap into that. And even my clients, my individual clients, that's a big thing. Like I have to get them to tap into what feels good. Like, I'm not going to tell you to get out there and jump into people's, DMs all day and jump on social media and record this stuff if it doesn't feel good, because then it's inauthentic and
Mhm.
people know when it's inauthentic. And so
Totally.
you have to figure out what works for you, what feels good to you. Like, what is in alignment with you,
Mhm.
what is your path, because someone else's path is not your path, and that's okay. So you have to figure out the what works for you, like what brings you alive and makes you feel good and gets you excited.
Yeah, love that. So key. And also tuning into our bodies to know what that looks like. I know it took me a couple decades to do that.
Hmm.
Surprisingly,
Hmm.
I actually didn't realize. I think it's not until the last 5 to 7 years I've actually really inhabited my body. You know,
Hmm.
that's a
Hmm.
pretty weird thing, actually,
Hmm.
to think
Yep.
about living from my head up to some
Yep.
degree versus
Yep.
actually inhabiting my body as a guide. Um, so get ready to wrap up. Not necessarily on a light note. You talked about vulnerability a
Hmm.
little bit on our last conversation, and vulnerability, as you well know, is so key. But it's hard to stay with, and in the
Hmm.
business space and the corporate space, it's
Hmm.
not the norm
Right.
to be able to let vulnerability be there. Can you
Hmm.
talk just a little bit about how to stay with vulnerability and those layers of vulnerability and how people can navigate being honest to that
Hmm.
and self care and also the sometimes the demands of
Hmm.
what needs to be done?
Hmm. Yeah. So I think in a corporate space, it starts from top up. And it starts again with that whole normalizing, like, again, it's the recognition that the person is a person
Mm-hmm.
and there are, being people centered and being
Yeah.
clear that, people are people. People come with stuff. People come with, traumas. People come with, issues. People come with stuff, as the person at the top does as well.
Right.
And so I think it's first recognizing that, but also it's either putting things in place that allow people to go in and say, be expressive of their feelings, or to share when they're struggling with something, or, to have that person. So if it is a, mental health professional or business therapist or a leadership coach or something of that sort, or the EAP, for people to have access to say, hey, this is what's going on with me and I need this space. Also,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really all about, like finding your folks, like no matter where you go. And so even in corporate environments, like who's your team, who's your crew, who's the people that, you feel like, hey, this person will understand and get it. And I can share with this person and it's okay. So I think it's about, again, creating those spaces, no matter where you are, and feeling okay with that. But then also it being something that is normal, at the company. I had a conversation with someone yesterday, and I was talking to them about, corporate training and coming in and doing something with them. And the person said, "Oh, well, we have a women's group, and we have uh, a group for Black professionals, and we have a group for, and they had like all these multiple groups within the organization."
Mm.
And I thought that was really cool because they get to have that space where, they feel like this person may get what I'm saying, or I can express myself in this group because they may understand what I'm saying. Or, I can share, when I'm having issues or concerns, or I just need some support, because I have that space to do so. So it's about creating the spaces. And really, I think on the employee side, it's advocating for yourself to have those spaces and for it to be okay.
Yeah, I love that. For those spaces, I think sometimes internally as well as externally, being able to
Definitely.
create space internally. So, so much
Definitely. Yeah,
wisdom.
some
I
of us
love
struggle
that.
with being vulnerable with ourselves.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. A whole
Yeah.
other conversation. So,
Yeah.
would love tell us anything else you'd like to share today, and please let folks know how they can find out more about you and your work and ways to work with you.
Yeah. So on a, business to business side, I'm a keynote speaker. I train, I come in, I do workshops. I It's really all about helping others to transition, back into the workplace and to do it seamlessly, to help them with, having those coping skills available in the workplace, helping the leaders to know how to manage, those different personalities that, have have changed and evolved, especially
Okay.
since the pandemic hit. But yeah, going to drfanike.com. I can always be reached there. And then also on the client side, if you're an individual and you feel like you need some support and that you would benefit from my services, you can also go to drfanike.com. And I'm also available on Instagram at Dr. Fanike, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Clubhouse at Dr. Fanike. I
Awesome.
can be reached anyway.
Great. We'll include all those links in the show notes of the episode. So, Dr. Fanike, thank you so much for joining. It's always such a delight
Thank
to
you,
speak with
Christine,
you.
for
So,
having me again.
so great to have you. So, thanks again.
No problem. Thank you.